Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre were both iconic philosophers of existentialism. They both pursued mostly the same concepts that were relative within each other, such as the concept of nothingness, and existence precedes essence.
Nothingness is the idea that we have been influenced so much that our consciousness is not real and is basically nothing without the influence that we have had throughout our lives. The theory that existence precedes essence is basically the same concept, but instead of saying is nothing, we're born into a world without a concept of meaning, and then later on in life we find that meaning.
Think of it this way. Before the hammer was invented, someone needed to think of something that would have the same purpose as that hammer. The essence of the hammer is to hammer things, and the existence of the hammer comes afterwards.
We are conscious beings who are not manipulated by outside factors. We are nothing but ourselves in our current state.
Simone de Beauvoir deeply dives into this question in her book called The Second Sex. The book is about her feminist views. She begins to explain the roles that have been given to women throughout the years by society. For example, women being stay-at-home mothers, being housemakers, etc.
In fact, this book had only 85% of it translated into English in the 1950s, and excluded most of the discussions of housework and a lot of the discussions about women having their own voice. This goes to show how frowned upon Beauvoir's ideas were. The latest full translation was later republished not until 2009. She also intertwined her philosophical ideas to do with nothingness and existence precedes essence. She puts together how or what a woman is in the state of nothingness without her duties given to her by society. She writes, her wings are cut, and then she is blamed for not knowing how to fly. Back in that day, a woman was deemed as nothing really without a man or a husband. And when people blame women for not knowing how to be on their own, it's kind of silly because they made their society that way.
Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre were actually in a romantic but open relationship with each other. They had adopted a daughter, and Sartre tried to marry Beauvoir, but then realized that it kind of went against her views, so they stayed as intellectuals.
Many people believe that Beauvoir was following in Sartre's footsteps and had her philosophy shaped by him, which is partially true, but she did have her own views, and Sartre also had his philosophies and ideas shaped by Beauvoir. They shared ideas hand in hand.
Since Jean-Paul Sartre was romantically involved with Simone de Beauvoir, he had to mostly have the same beliefs as her. He wrote a book called Being and Nothingness, which goes over his philosophical ideas and stance on nothingness.
Beauvoir and Jean-Paul had the same stance on nothingness, except she was more based upon her feminist ideals. Jean-Paul Sartre went into the ideas of what it is to simply be human in this world. He suggested that people are not like things. For example, a hammer is a thing. This basically means that people are nothing yet. Beauvoir puts it this way, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman.
Since Sartre and Beauvoir were both atheists, they did not believe that they had a creator like God, for example. So they were not created with an essence in mind. So they had no purpose given to them by religion or some other creator they had believed in. Therefore, they just exist for nothing really. In Sartre's book, Being and Nothingness, he explains how nothingness is the base of existence, and then goes on to explain we end up filling this void with a fake self-identity nothingness carries, being in his heart, he says.
Since we are sandwiched between an unbridled imagination or thought and tightly constrained world and regulated actions, we develop a sense of self. In other words, the self is created by free thoughts floating in nothingness, colliding with the unfree outside world of existence. Hence, we are beings in nothingness.